Now, so I'm going to say some of the questions in case we were reporting out there, Max.
Really? We can't, that's it? No sound from out?
Well, we're going to...
In Google Land?
But we could sit here and wait for them to find an answer, or we can continue talking. We assume we're being airing on Google Plus because it says on air. So,
yeah, well, I don't know why we need to focus on the questions from the users. I think we should just...
Here's somebody, okay, somebody just sent in a question. What happens when QE finally ends?
Well, darling, as you know, this is what everyone wants to know. It'll end the way all Ponzi schemes end, whether it's Enron, WorldCom, Bernie Madoff, or the Federal Reserve Bank. It will end suddenly, violently, and will be post the central bank era.
And then we also have a question from Luke Trahim that just came in, and he asked, what advice would you give the lost generation?
Well, I think that they should focus on becoming programming experts. Wouldn't you agree? You are always saying, you know, learn how to program. Become programmers. That was my mistake. I didn't learn how to be a programmer.
I would also learn how to be a cryptographer, because that's important in this day and age, I think. And of course, there's a great opportunity, I think, as well at this point in time, because everybody's moving off the U.S. system, and that's in fact one of the questions somebody asked. Is Jeremy Wood asked, Brazil will lay their own undersea fiber optics. Your thoughts on this? So there's an opportunity here because the NSA has destroyed the entire U.S.-based, you know, cloud sort of system.
Right. Well, the internet was based under the auspices of U.S. authorities who put out this message to the world: trust us. Just trust us. We're America. You can trust us. And now these big countries don't trust America anymore, so they're splintering off into factions, whether it's Brazil, and I would imagine you're going to see 3 or 4 major internet factions splitting off, just like you're going to see the U.S. dollar lose reserve currency, and you'll see 3 or 4 major currencies trading as a block, and or some other outcome on the currency front. But the U.S. domination, or U.S. empire, as some call it, that era is coming to a close. We saw it with the Syria move, which was direct confrontation in a soft way anyway, that just shut down American foreign policy like a curtain coming down suddenly. We're seeing it now with the Federal Reserve Bank. They have no ability to do anything but print money now. They have no options. As we said 3 weeks ago, they're not going to taper. They can't taper. It's impossible to taper. They cannot unwind. Nobody will buy these bonds except themselves. And so America is very much in a trap that it can't get out of unless it's like a wolf in a trap. The only way it can get out of it is to chew its own arm off to get out of the trap. That's how bad the trap is for them.
Okay, well, we're going to go to a nonsense question now.
Nonsense? What? Okay.
Yes, our users have sent in some nonsense questions. And by the way, also text us or tweet us. I'll check my tweets if you can see us. Because there's been quite a lot of problems starting this Google Hangout today.
Yeah, Google has a few issues, don't they?
And we don't actually know if we're on air right now, so we're just talking like we are.
Yeah, it's just home with Max and Stacy. Well, darling.
So I have a question, and this is from Matt Villa, and he asked, if Carl Icahn was a sandwich, what sort of sandwich would he be? Bile
and guacamole.
Carl Icahn, of course, is?
Well, he's a corporate raider. You know, they used to call them green mailers back in the 80s, and then they've rebranded themselves as quote-unquote activist investors. But he's a green mailer, which is a euphemism for blackmail. And guys like Carl Icahn add nothing to the U.S. economy. They simply gang up on companies, and they blackmail them. They're blackmailing Apple Computer currently, but Carl Icahn is a blackmailer. He's not a businessman in the sense that he's adding any kind of value added to what he does, but he's one of the last of his breed. There were many more of his type active back in the 80s, like Ron Perlman and Jimmy Goldsmith and Carl Icahn, and of course Ivan Boesky, Mike Milken during the Drexel Burnham era. He's He's a holdover from the Drexel Burnham era, the Mike Milken era, and
Mike Milken, of course, is somebody you've spoken about in the past often. He's the junk bond king.
Yeah, Mike Milken used to be the junk bond king, and he's been barred from the securities industry as part of the collapse of the stock market in 1987, and the fallout from that event. I was working as a stockbroker at that time.
So now, apparently we are live. I see some tweets there.
Okay.
So now everybody's asking about this statement that happened here from Alistair Darling, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer. He was Chancellor of the Exchequer during the crash, during the prime ministership of, what's his name? Oh yeah, Gordon Brown, the guy who sold all of Britain's gold, or half of Britain's gold at the bottom. Well, Elma Riachi asked, Alistair Darling said that Britain was just 2 hours away from total social collapse. Max contends that we were 2 hours away from taking control of the banking sector. So the question is, Max, what would you have done? Were you in Alistair Darling's shoes, apart from giving them a spray with some antifungal deodorant?
Yeah, I said that he says the UK was 2 hours away from collapse. I say it was 2 hours away from accountability. And I think you got to look at what we're seeing now with Lloyds Bank. Lloyds Bank was partially nationalized. They're now being, that stock is being resold as a public offering. They're going to be making £3 billion or so. And but what I would have suggested Alistair Darling do at that time is, instead of partially nationalize a couple of the big four banks, but not fire anyone and not pursue any criminal prosecutions whatsoever, they should have nationalized all of the big four UK banks. They should have at least fired all the management that were responsible for fraud, malfeasance, multiple instances of fraud, criminal fraud. They should have then pursued criminal cases against the management of these banks. And now here we are 5 years later, and these banks would all be re-entering the public domain again. They'd be sold the public stock, but they would become private entities again after the UK went through this process. We saw something similar during the savings and loan crisis back in the 80s under Reagan. And of course, Bill Black was the prosecutor at that time. He put over 1,500 bankers in jail. They put the Resolution Trust Corporation, they put all the bad assets into that, and they worked through it over 20, 25 years' time. So my suggestion to Alistair Darling, if I were in that position, I would have nationalized all big four banks, fired all the management, replaced them with competent managers who were not hardened financial terrorists, as I call them, and then 5 years later we would be taking those banks public, and the system would be healthier because you wouldn't have the same kleptocracy in place as you do now. So now it's just a huge setup for a bigger crash, but much bigger.
Okay, I'm going to try to select one of these people because it says that I could select some of these people. We've already asked that one. Okay, let's see. Let's, for example, see. Oh, I thought you would appear on the video chat. So what do you think of the future of cryptocurrencies? Of course, Bitcoin is the biggest one. You've actually received many questions about Bitcoin. Are you still enthusiastic about it? What do you think of the future of Bitcoin?
Well, I established a private equity fund here in the UK called Heisenberg Capital. And the purpose of this fund is to invest in cryptocurrencies and related businesses. So we already have a position in BitPay, which just signed on their 10,000th user. They just signed on a German gamer that has 350 million customers. So BitPay looks like it's going to be a huge winner. And I'm talking all the time with people in the Bitcoin space. I had a meeting with the Winklevoss twins in New York, with Matthew Mellon, who I'm working with also now at looking at different companies. I had a meeting with Barry Silbert over at Second Market in New York City. He's got big news for Bitcoin coming out within 2 weeks. I don't know if it's public yet, but it's going to be big news coming out of New York. And I think Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies will be the Fed killer, as I've said many times. The Fed is in the death throes, and I think cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin are going to facilitate that.
It might be outside of the U.S. Of course, the U.S. will be excluded from many things. But now, a lot of people were asking about your prediction for April 2013. Michelle Z asked, could you please rephrase or refine your previous April 2013 collapse prediction. And before we say that, you can tweet us with the hashtag Keiser500 or tweet me at Stacy Herbert. You should follow me too.
What? Follow Stacy Herbert on Twitter.
And we're, this is the first ever Keiser. This is the first ever actual Google Hangout for RT. So
yes,
this is the very first one. Sorry if there were any glitches at the top of the show. We're figuring it out now. I see all of these messages coming in on our Google Plus account as well. So there are a lot of questions. But the April 2013, you said there would be the giant collapse, crash, whatever. Would you like to revise that statement or clarify or rephrase?
Well, in April of 2012, approximately, I was a guest on the Alex Jones show, and he asked me, as he always does, when will we see a collapse or a major event? And I went out on a limb and I said, I'll say in a year, 12 months from now, we'll see a major event. Now, what we did see within 2 weeks of that April 15th date that I predicted was the absolute top in the bond market. So you hit a 300-year top in bonds in the United Kingdom. United Kingdom bonds had not reached that level of appreciation in the 300 years since they created the Bank of England. And in the UK, bonds hit a 240-year high. So within 2 weeks, we saw the bond market hit its top. Yields now are moving up. So on that basis, I was uncannily accurate. I was spookily accurate, almost accurate to a point of having some point of clairvoyance. So that would be my first answer. My second answer is that people in the bond market have suffered huge losses recently. Now you've got, with this recent news on the tapering, you've got a pullback. But the story going forward is going to be bonds returning very nothing but losses. And also, I would add that priced in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin at that time was less than $5. It made a move to, it's currently at $125. So priced in Bitcoin, every single asset in the world has collapsed against Bitcoin. So, all those things adding together, and I say that I was, I was absolutely correct.
Okay.
As usual.
We get a lot.
As usual. I said there'd be no taper. I said categorically there would be no taper, along with Peter Schiff, along with
Jim Rickards
on our show. Also Bill Fleckenstein out in California. Also
Bill Fleckenstein. He worked for Drexel Burnham, didn't he?
Did he? Could be.
Well, we have a whole bunch of questions coming in, pouring in, and greetings from all over the world. South Africa, Mexico, Mexico City. There's from Robert Rose down in Mexico City. But I want to ask some of these questions. They came in earlier. They've been on earlier. And this is such an exciting thing, actually. Are you excited?
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. Where's my coffee?
Yeah, where's the coffee?
What's going on in this joint? We got...
So now, this kind of goes with the last question as well. Christina Brooks asks, what are the typical indices of financial malfeasance and publicly available corporate financial data that you look at?
You just look at the off-balance sheet items. Every 10Q or 10K has off-balance sheet items. That's where they hide all the junk, and you'll see what the liabilities are really, and that'll give you an idea.
Now, Rico Brower asked, do you see changes happening in an accelerated pace? And if so, do you see them going exponential, for example, this year? And when I saw that question, I thought of what Ernest Hemingway had said in the book. How did you go bankrupt? 2 ways, gradually, then very suddenly. So I think that's what we'll see as well, is that we are going bankrupt. Obviously, the world is bankrupt, and people are looking for that sudden big collapse. But it's already happening. It just happens slowly and then suddenly.
I agree. No, the question is somewhat vague. It says, what is the question? Do you see big change?
Do you see changes happening in an accelerated pace? And if so, do you see them going exponentially?
Okay, but what do you mean by change? What kind of change? Political change?
Political change.
Economic change?
I think
some kind of change of consciousness. What kind of change?
Well, we covered this a bit on the Keiser Report. from Long Island City with Manhattan in the background. Remember, we covered the collapse of the empire. You see that with this NSA.
Well, let me ask you this. How much faster could change be coming? You have a revolution in Egypt. You have revolutions all over North Africa. You have a total turmoil in the Eurozone. Greece is collapsing. America just got completely monkey-hammered by Russia and the rest of the world on this Syria debacle. And Fed chairman, it looks like a complete pygmy, intellectual pygmy. And, you know, how much faster do you want to go? Maybe just take a ball-peen hammer and, you know, hit your head really quickly. If you want change to happen faster, you're not taking the right drugs. Take better drugs, and change will happen faster.
Do you believe that we can get a true free market? I want to make people aware of the free market and as a great economic system. John Sneeson says.
What's the question?
Is it possible to get a true free market?
Yeah, it's possible. Sure. I mean, we've had periods where markets have been free, and by a free market I mean a market that's well balanced between the interest of price discovery and fair price discovery, the interest of all participants, all stakeholders in that market. We have instances of free markets and markets, which markets at the end of the day are a superior form of allocating risk and reward than a central committee. This is clearly the case. I believe there are some who believe that you need a centralized committee, a centralized power authority to dispense the wisdom from the center. That has proven to be a failure. It has proven not to work. Markets have proven to be a better. So going back to Adam Smith's day in the Enlightenment, it's a better showcase. Unfortunately, you don't have a free market in the United States. You don't have a free market anywhere in the world right now. You have a very warped market. Do you guys have to keep chatting back there? Because it's kind of disrupting.
We have people in here chatting and making it very difficult to concentrate here. You guys could go in another room if you want.
Yeah.
We're live here on the Keiser Report episode, celebrating episode 500. Hashtag Keiser500 if you want to tweet us. Actually, let's read a tweet just to keep people.
Let's read a tweet.
So, Max Keiser from Gold Silver News, she asks, will the CFTC 5-year investigation into price manipulation ever see the light of day?
No. No. I mean, the top regulator, who's the public face of the CFTC, that blonde-haired fella, Bart Chilton. He's a show pony. Basically, they trot him out to say that they're really interested in what the CFTC is doing. Gary Gensler, who runs the CFTC, is really concerned with all these allegations, and he'll make a few public appearances, but he is completely a facade. He's never come on our show. He'll never come on a show like ours because we would rip him a new asshole, if I can use that phrase.
Oh, yeah, I don't need to bleep that.
I have no bleep. We would rip Bart a new asshole if he came on my show. Okay? Because Bart is a guy, he's been involved in a number of skullduggery over there at the CFTC, Bart. Come on my show if you dare. Bart Chilton, I challenge you. He'll never do it because he's a crook. He's a shyster.
Okay, now on our Google Plus page, along the lines of these gold and silver precious metals, Max Keiser, I should move over a little bit. You said in a video that you will disappear when gold hits $5,000, just like Satoshi Nakamoto did after creating Bitcoin. Why is that? Do you think that you will be a much bigger target after it happens?
When the price of gold gets to 5,000, it'll be because the dollar is truly been overtaken and has been demolished. And social unrest will be extremely high. I encourage everyone to disappear when gold gets to 5,000.
How can we all?
Well, I'm just saying that the social unrest is going to be quite, it's kind
of like a typical day in America in one of these mass shootings, maybe. It's going to be more like that, like on a daily, hourly sort of basis?
I think that there's going to be such economic turmoil that if gold, when it gets to 5,000, I'm saying that I would probably opt to simply disappear. I don't want to be, I'm happy at that point to simply walk away.
Now this Philip Heda Niatia I probably pronounced that wrong, sorry. What do you think is the future of RT television, and why has it not successfully cut through the U.S. TV market to a level of other cable news networks?
Well, I mean,
they're wrong.
The U.S. market is, the United States is 5% of the world's population, and it's not really that big a market in absolute terms. So in real terms, in absolute terms, RT is now, the reach is 750 million. It's bigger than BBC now. It's the biggest global satellite and cable network in the world. It has the first to over 1 billion views on YouTube. It's in more airports. It's in more hotels. So RT is now the colossus of global satellite and cable television networks, bigger than the BBC. It's the #1 foreign channel in the UK with over 2 million viewers.
In the US as well. It's way higher than BBC, according to the recent articles in the US.
Okay,
so in fact, everywhere we go in New York City, every single taxi driver and police officer knows us.
Yeah, it's huge. I don't think it's covered in celebrity gossip magazines.
So the police officers might know us for another reason.
And most people get their news from celebrity gossip magazines, so they don't see RT in the pages of People magazine, perhaps. So people think, oh wow, I wonder why that is. Well, I think you need to up your game, your media game.
Well, speaking of celebrity gossip, Bankster Slayer wants to know, how did Max and Stacy meet each other?
That's right. Well, darling, shall I tell the story?
You can.
Well,
no.
Not at all?
Somebody asked, well, you can if you want. But somebody also asked your favorite color. That's kind of personal.
Is that related?
I don't even really know your favorite color. Okay.
Well, no, we met in the south of France.
Sounds exotic.
Yes, I was living in the south of France in a small town called Villefranche-sur-Mer, and I was at an internet cafe, and in walked Stacy Herbert.
See, everything. The future is the internet. That's when you knew. That was in 2003. You knew this is all. And then it was right before Shock and Awe, and we spent Shock and Awe together.
Yeah, we spent Shock and Awe here in London at Hazlitt's Hotel in Soho.
Yes.
I remember that. We watched Shock and Awe go down, and but that's how we met. We met in an internet cafe.
Okay, there you have it. Now you could, of course, continue sending us your tweets. I prefer you write to me, Twitter at Stacy Herbert, or hashtag Keiser500. Now let's skip to some more questions. Oh, well, actually somebody's mentioning that there's been a 5.8 magnitude earthquake reported near Fukushima. So there's a question regarding Japan. This was before the 5.8 magnitude earthquake, and that is from Odun. Asked, Japan's debt has now surpassed 1 quadrillion yen. What's your response to that report by Goldcore?
Well, you have to look at the history of Japanese economy post-World War II. Japan accumulated the world's biggest savings account of any country in the world. The Japanese housewife, the famous Mrs. Watanabe, was saving something outrageous like 22 or 27% of after-tax income for decades, and their savings account, their postal savings account, their national savings account became quite huge. So it happened after the whole deregulatory environment of the 80s and after the introduction of financial derivatives and forex trading in the 90s. You had smart Wall Street types figure out that they could engage in what is called the carry trade. So they sell short Japanese yen, and then they use the money to buy higher yielding currencies in other countries. And as a result of this carry trade, over the course of 20 years, that savings account in Japan was run down to where it is now, close to zero. So now the debts of Japan are reflecting the fact that they've been abused by these carry traders for decades now. And with the Fukushima disaster, they have no money to rebuild. The nuclear energy is really not happening in Japan right now. And so Japan could be a country that we see utterly collapse, setting off. It could set off the next wave, the next Lehman-like collapse. It's either going to be Japan will be collapsed, or Deutsche Bank, which is leveraged 60, 65 to 1, could collapse to set off this huge next round of global Armageddon. But those are the two leading candidates, Japan and Deutsche Bank.
And what about the UK? Because we have this amazing housing bubble just accelerating. Part of it, I think, is the front running of George Osborne's next wave of this Help to Buy scheme, which from January 2014 is like using taxpayer funds to back mortgages up to the equivalent of $1 million.
Yeah, the UK is also has the highest debt to GDP ratio of any country in the world, if you include both the national debt, the corporate debt, household debt,
Banking debt.
bank debt. If you add it all up, they've got a GDP to debt of almost over 900% GDP. It's much higher than any other country in the world. So higher interest rates are. Remember, Mark Carney came on and promised lower interest rates. That was his forward guidance, and since he said that, interest rates have really gone up every single day since then. And that means that the debt service for the UK will continue to be a problem. And they're trying to desperately overcome that by starting another housing bubble, by offering government subsidies and guarantees, trying to replay the entire subprime Fannie Mae Freddie Mac crisis in America to avert the disaster coming from these higher interest rates that are going to happen regardless. So it's a huge problem.
A tweet just came in from Idiocy Hurts My Head at Brain Camps. What does Max think about Goldman Sachs and now Bank of America going long on gold and silver? Does this end manipulation?
Well, they're going to manipulate it higher now.
Yeah.
They manipulated the price of gold and silver down for years. The price of gold and silver now bottomed out, and now they're just entering a new phase of the bull market, and these banks are now going to be participating on the long side of those markets. When silver hit 50 and then had a backup back to the 21, 22 range, that was the time when J.P. Morgan got out of their huge short position. When I started Crash J.P. Morgan buy silver, if you had 100 million people around the world each buy an ounce of silver, they would have put J.P. Morgan out of business because their shorts on silver were 10 times bigger than the entire capitalization of the company. But instead, people did not participate en masse the way that they could have to put that company out of business. So instead, Morgan, over the past 5 or 6 years, has used their ability to use paper contracts, et cetera, to force the price down, unwind their shorts, and now they're going to go long because they know that the dollar is in jeopardy. They know that gold, silver, oil, commodities are going to be really the only thing that will have any kind of significant move against a collapsing dollar.
Shara Bingham Mills asks, I can't believe we are just going to keep printing money. I want to know how many more times this can be done. Can we do this forever?
Well, this is a question we asked Jim Rickards on our show. And, I think Jim Rickards has a good insight into this when he says that the only central bank in the world that hasn't been totally leveraged with several $1 trillion worth of debt is the IMF. And the IMF, as a central bank, could be the place where the debts from the United States, the U.S., and Japan are recalculated, repriced, resecuritized, but in the basis of a special drawing right, which is the currency of the IMF. So I asked Jim about this, and I said, do you foresee some kind of roll-up where they have a global meeting like a Bretton Woods meeting, and there's a repricing for all these currencies against this SDR? And he said, no, probably what will happen is they'll start trading oil, not in dollars, but in SDRs, and oil is the #1 commodity traded all over the world, and that will be the beginning of the end officially for the Federal Reserve and the dollar, and the beginning of IMF and the SDR being the global reserve currency essentially. But for that to go forward, when that goes forward, these other currencies will be repriced, and the dollar will lose a tremendous amount of value.
Yeah, but one thing, when I look around Europe and I see how much better the average middle-class person lives in Europe, they have a much higher standard of living compared to American population. Despite what many Americans don't understand that because they haven't traveled outside the country. But when the U.S. dollar loses its reserve currency, of course, they will no longer be sent free oil and free goods and services. They'll have to pay for it. But I think it might not necessarily seem as bad as what right now you're getting a free lunch essentially in America. But once you have to start paying for it, it actually, by European standards, if Europe is an example, it could get better because the governments and the elite need you to work so that they could earn wealth rather than just printing it for themselves.
Well, another prediction I made 2 years ago was that the euro was not going to disintegrate. Remember during the height of the Greek, what was called the Grexit, and that the euro had to split up. And most pundits said the euro was going to split up. It was going to definitely split up. I said definitely would not split up, and that the euro has a lot of strength, and now we're seeing the euro strength. Because in the eurozone is something called Germany, and Germany is probably the most successful economy right now.
There's louders in there.
Here's some people.
I hear it. Hold on. Okay, Zaid Gardner, you're on the. Did you want to? Oh, hold on. Did you want to say something, Zaid?
Oh, hi, Zaid. Hi.
It's the guy on Jimmy. The guy on Archie.
I guess you don't have a question.
I have a question.
Okay.
I think Saeed thought we were on chat roulette.
David H. Gardner, okay. What's your question?
Well, I've been watching the Keiser Report for a while now. I've been in RT for about 2 years now. And I really love the Keiser Report, and I love the stuff you guys do about gold. So I was wondering, I've been doing a little research into gold myself, and I was wondering if you have any idea on how gold has historically accrued its value. I mean, where does the origin of the value of gold come from? I mean, is it just that someone decided that they like gold more than silver or any other precious metal? Or where does this historic value of gold originate from?
Yeah, well,
that's a good question.
Sure. I mean, you go back going back to Aristotle's time, there was a discussion about what constitutes money, what would be the perfect money, and Aristotle suggested there were 4 attributes that make great money. And I believe you've got one is that it's scarce, one that it's fungible, portable, and desirable. Now gold fills all of those, ticks all those boxes. It's been used as money for 5,000 years, so it has historically been used as money. The world global economy has at times run on a gold standard very successfully. So it has historical precedence. It has precedence in terms of its intrinsic value, you could call it, and why it works as an intrinsic value. And I might also add that this is what makes Bitcoin such an appealing currency, because it also fulfills all 4 of Aristotle's checklists for a currency. It has intrinsic value, it's portable, it's fungible, it's scarce, and people desire it.
I might also add that our frequent guest, Sandeep Jaitley, who is a student of Karl Menger, would say that Karl Menger, the father of Austrian school economics, said that all value comes from human consciousness. So it's because humans value it that it has value. It's not necessarily anything that is outside of human consciousness, that without us here, it wouldn't have value. And the other thing is another guest, David Graeber, who wrote the book about the 5,000 years of debt. He said that we often go to gold-backed currencies in a time of great mistrust, especially with the soldiers. Soldiers always want to be paid before they set off across the world to go fight a war for some guy they were a mercenary for, some emperor or something, that they would want to be paid in gold.
Right. Well, the history of currencies, we've seen gold, we've seen silver, we've seen a bimetal exchange, we've seen fractional gold reserves. We've seen different variations on gold, silver, precious metals, and we've seen other attempts to create currency systems. And but historically, gold has always been preferable. It has a test of time, and this is I think the big question for me is that as the global economy now begins to enter a period of chaos, what are the 1,600 billionaires in the world going to do? Forbes just came out with their Forbes 400 list, I'm not sure exactly how many billionaires there are. I think there's approximately 1,600. There are over 100 million multi-hundred millionaires, I believe, or 600,000, 100 million decamillionaires. So the question is, they own less than 1% of gold in their portfolios. Mm-hmm. And gold is about a $6 trillion, $7 trillion market completely. All the gold above ground, price at current market prices, is about $7 trillion. So these guys, they control, let's call it $100 trillion in wealth, and they are going to fall out of bed of the dollar. Bonds are looking bad. Stock market at some point reverts back to a crash mode. Where do they put their cash? Are they going to put it into the U.S. dollar or a currency, a fiat currency that has no controls on it whatsoever? Or are they going to take their investment portfolio from 1% gold to, historically, it's been as high as 5 or 6% during the 80s. We saw it get that high.
Yeah, even higher.
If you put that amount of cash into this gold market, that's how you get to $5,000 gold to $10,000 gold. I believe a rich person would prefer gold over paper money. There are some people, and I think Robert Prechter, who's a good friend of ours down in Gainesville, Georgia, believes that there's going to be a rush for paper money. I don't agree with that. I think that the rich people have historically always come back to gold.
And houses. You see that everywhere in London and New York, of course. Who wants to have the next question? How about you, Gord Birch? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. How about you?
No sound.
He has sound. He just doesn't have a question.
Okay. He's a mime.
Max learned that in Paris.
Hey.
Somebody asked what's on the T-shirt. We'll do a little bit of a.
What T-shirt? My T-shirt?
I guess so. That's not you.
It's a bit personal, I think. You're gonna do a striptease? What kind of chat they got going on here? This is one of them porno channels. This is chat roulette.
Who are these people who logged on? You know when you come on.
And why are they asking about my T-shirt, not your T-shirt? Get a life, buddy.
Okay. Well, let's.
By the way, what is on your T-shirt? Now you got me curious now.
I don't have a T-shirt. I have a thing. Oh, here's a good question. Speaking of Sandeep Jaitley, he really laughed at this one. Are we really a sneeze away from fudged?
Yeah. Well, I believe that means that
the other F word, basically.
I would say that we are in the process of this fudgedness, because if you look at
that's a new word coined here on this Google Hangout with Keiser Report, hashtag Keiser500 in Google, and fudged.
We're in fudged right now. We're in the middle of infudgedness, because you look at the last 5 years during the so-called recovery, the wealth and income gap has reached proportions that we never even saw during the robber baron period. So that's clearly class war. I mean, there's a war going on. Even Warren Buffett said, we're in a class war and my class is winning. You know, that's right. And those people who are poor today are going to be poorer tomorrow because inflation is raging, income is down, productivity stinks here in the UK. So we're right now, the fudge is happening, buddy.
Umberto Chacon on Twitter asked if it's possible to create a free market. You'll have to look at the YouTube version of this later because we already answered that. But
I want to add something.
Do you?
I created technology for creating free markets, and I have patents on those technologies. Patent number 5650176, I believe, is the patent number, the U.S. patent number, for the virtual specialist technology, which makes fair markets in a superior manner than has ever been invented ever in history. Unfortunately, those patents and intellectual property are now warehoused at a Wall Street bank who refuses to allow them to be used in the way that they were designed. So that's what happens with technology and patents. A lot of times, companies warehouse them, and they're not in the public domain as they should be. And I'm sorry about that, but I made the invention. You can look it up. There's a possibility to have a fair market in these types of virtual currency markets and these new markets, but unfortunately the bank on Wall Street will not allow that to be in the public domain because they're greedy.
Okay, we have 10 more minutes here. We're going to finish this up with some more questions. You can continue sending them on our Google Plus page or tweet us at Stacy Herbert or #500. And actually, this goes along with something we were talking about earlier, and that is that Roland Lawrence asks on Twitter, if the security services can crack encryption, is Bitcoin still safe to use?
Well, they haven't cracked encryption. Explain to them the situation.
They have not cracked encryption. I was going to say infudged.
They have not infudged encraction. They've encracted my infudgement. Will not allow.
Hey, stop talking.
Stop drinking.
So we're answering this question here. They have not cracked encryption. What they've done is, because that would take, somebody explained it to me, a lot of the encryption would take like billions of years, literally, to crack.
No, they're telling you.
Yeah, but what they're doing is they backdoors, and they're getting, basically the likes, the U.S. companies who offer encryption services. They're basically presenting them with these NSA letters, which they cannot tell anybody without fear of being charged with treason.
No, it's like okay, the new iPhone. It's built in with Apple's ability to read what you're doing. For example, you know that technology that they track your keyboard strokes.
Yeah.
So that's not breaking the code. They're just tracking your keystrokes.
Yeah.
So it's similar to that. With the Apple and Google and all these technology companies are now sitting in your technology, spying on you as you enter in your various data. You know, the encryption works, but if you have somebody who's right behind you watching you, then there's a problem. And that's what these companies have done now. And that's why Brazil is dropping out of the internet. That Brazil is dropping out of the accords with America. And Brazil is upset with the U.S. That's why Russia is upset. That's why China, the BRIC nations are rising because of the NSA, because of the MPAA, because of the technology companies that don't give a fig about civil rights, human rights.
Now, remember, they used to tell you long ago.
No. Hello.
Somebody muted you.
We can't hear you.
You have to unmute yourself. Somebody muted you.
Funny. There we are.
We're back?
We're back.
Okay, yeah.
Somebody muted us. That's a
Well, you're the one with the mouse.
No, I mean, people out there can mute us too.
So when I start talking about Google, I was muted?
By Google Plus.
What's going on, Google? I'm going to call Alex Jones right now.
Actually, it could have been the NSA, because of course.
Well, I'm going to tell Alex Jones about this. Get him on the phone right now. This is a conspiracy.
But anyway, remember back in the day, they used to tell you, if you're really angry and you want to do something horrible or say something horrible, write it down first and don't send the letter. Back in the day when you had to actually post a letter. Now, I guess you can commit a crime, a thought crime, just for thinking all those horrible things and typing it down and erasing it before you send the email.
Well, that's what the technology, the metadatabase vacuuming of information and data put in through algorithmic treatment will allow in agencies, intelligence agencies, and law enforcement agencies to make educated guesses about who might be doing what when, and then that's probable cause to then violate your Fourth Amendment rights. So that is unconscionably a slap in the face of the Constitution. I mean, they should just have their ad for these technology companies should just be a flaming Constitution. And who can burn the Constitution fastest? That's who gets the big. I mean, that chick who runs Yahoo said that that the NSA, not to comply with the NSA was tyranny. No, you freaking bonehead!
It's treason.
It's treason. No, you freaking bonehead! Complying with the NSA is treason. Yahoo girl. No, where'd you go to school? I mean, these people are shocking.
Well, here's actually an interesting question, a little bit off. It's back to. Oh, wait, actually, we have a video guy here who wants to talk.
No, I see his hand up.
Arturo Monzon. Okay.
Just a quick question. And because QE is going to continue, I wanted to know what that means in terms of the value of gold in terms of dollar and also in euro and yen, because I like to think of gold in more than one currency. So where are we headed to in the direction of the dollar versus other currencies?
Okay, so we just saw about a week ago gold almost hit a new all-time high in Indian rupee.
Yes.
So that was a huge benchmark right there. So obviously it's going to hit new highs against all currencies, that's the answer. I mean, it's going to hit highs against all. The big one, of course, because it's priced in dollars, is when is it going to go over $2,000. But along with that would be the conclusion that it'll hit new highs against every currency.
Yes, but now Arturo also mentioned quantitative easing and its role in the price of gold. And this is actually a really interesting thing. There's loads of writing. Professor Facchetta, who we're going to have on again soon, many of the guests on the Keiser Report have talked about that from the April smash in the gold price, when they knew all along the notion that they were going to taper in any way was a hoax. They knew they were not going to taper. They knew they were going to continue with $85 billion of Fed printing every month. So, they are interlinked. Obviously, the Fed knew. They claim that they don't care about the price of gold and they don't care where it goes. But I think that's important to look at. It is a crucial thing for them.
Well, the key, we saw it before the no taper announcement was made. Gold was smashed down to below that $1,400 level.
It was close to $1,200.
It got smashed because to manage this ongoing charade in quantitative easing, which of course not only will it not stop, but it will be increased. Quantitative easing will go from $85 billion a month to $160 billion a month. For that to work with some semblance of order, there has to be this huge effort to try to support the bond market over the gold market. So, because you don't want gold to reflect the true demand. Demand for gold has never been higher, ever. And the supply of bonds has never been higher, ever.
Yeah.
But the price of bonds, although it hit the all-time high recently that I alluded to, have not crashed, even though the supply of bonds is, if you take away government support of the bond market, the demand for bonds is virtually non-existent, government bonds. So, and the demand for gold is never ever been higher. So these are the two things that are with quantitative easing. Not only do they liquefy their own balance sheet, but they liquefy banks in the City of London and on Wall Street in their ability to keep their open market operations open in terms of trying to manage the price of gold. But they're going to fail.
So one of the top two questions ranked on Google Plus, the RT Google Plus Hangout page, are from Fernando Noriega, who asked, Max, what would you recommend the 99% do in order to protect ourselves against a dollar collapse? 20% of assets in gold, hold other currencies, buy land. And the other one, kind of tied to this, is from Luke Trahim. And Trahim, he says, what is the future of the euro?
Well, I mean, the 99%, there are ways to push back that would give them tremendous representation in this economy that they currently lack. But they're unwilling to do the things that I have suggested that they do.
Like buy an ounce of silver?
Well, buying silver and gold is obviously the first choice, but a lot of people don't have any money. So the question is, how can you monetize your descent? I've written about that extensively over the years. How do you monetize your descent? And of course, that gets back into my idea that if the entire global anti-Wall Street Occupy movement were to focus on their boycotting efforts, and the boycott is a no-cost weapon. It doesn't cost you anything to boycott. That's what makes it incredibly powerful. It costs you nothing. If you had the entire global 99% victims boycotting a company that was vulnerable to a boycott, because not all companies are vulnerable to a boycott. Exxon is not vulnerable to a boycott. Monsanto is not vulnerable to a boycott. Coca-Cola is, McDonald's is, Starbucks is. If those companies were targeted with a global boycott with the sole intention of destroying the stock price, in other words, do not stop, until the stock price gets wiped out. Then this community would have power. They'd have power in this game. They would be represented in this game, and their demands would be met. But for some reason, they refuse to participate on that level. They want to try to participate on the moral argument level. But there is no moral argument. Morality does not trade on the New York Stock Exchange. There is no market for morality. It's unrecognized. There is nothing called morality in the world today. There's no price for it, therefore it does not exist. So if you're trying to win your argument with morality, you're living on, activists on Mars and everyone else is on Venus. They're completely separate.
We got asked another question by Humberto Chacon on Twitter. What is your opinion of the economy of Venezuela? What are your thoughts on that? Because people ask us all the time to comment on, say, France or Germany or Italy or Spain or places where you don't really understand the language, you don't understand the players and who's who. We understand the language of credit default swaps and bonds and how, because those are priced in numbers that we can understand. So in terms of what's actually going on in Venezuela on an economic, like the local level, it's kind of difficult to know. I mean, we do know that they took back their gold. That's right. That's an economic act. It's a powerful one against the empire, for example. I don't know about their oil business enough, especially because we only read in English, and as you know, a lot of the American press doesn't like Venezuela, so it's hard to decipher what is propaganda and what is truth, what is false.
Well, when you mentioned Venezuela, for some reason I immediately thought of Argentina. Yeah. And the reason I mentioned, think about Argentina, is that the volume in Bitcoin transactions in Argentina were skyrocketing in the month of July. Yeah. And so when you're talking about some of these countries that have been victim, Argentina was victimized by Citibank in the 1980s. I think it was Walter Wriston was running at that time, and they absolutely eviscerated that economy by forcing the government to take on the debts of Citibank and then imposing austerity to bail out Citibank. So we've seen that used again and again and again. That was a trick that they've now used in America.
And on Greece, because they used the IMF. The Citibank funds debts were transferred to the IMF, which were then forced onto the government. So this is the same exact thing we saw in Greece.
That's the template that they've used. Yeah. And the results are the same. You have a disenfranchisement and you have massive poverty and austerity. But with Venezuela, as you mentioned, they've repatriated their gold. But yes, they are an oil-rich country, and so they are constantly battling the major U.S. and British oil companies like Exxon or that eco-holocaust provoker, British Petroleum.
Well, I mean, so I didn't even know, for example, oil wealth is often a curse to many nations because, for example, in Saudi Arabia, they don't need the population, the 5,000 princes. So because they could just print oil, they can just pump out some more oil and have all the wealth they need. Now, in a place like Norway has saved all their oil wealth. They had, quite similar, a little bit more than the UK North Sea oil, which the UK blew it all, took all the money and the wealth from their oil and put it into house speculation and leveraged it up, and now they're in a huge debt bubble. But so I don't know what Venezuela is doing with if they have developed a sovereign wealth fund and things like that. But anything you can find that on both sides of the argument that you want to send us.
Well, Chavez survived a coup attempt, and there's a lot of history, as John Perkins, the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, will tell you. Yeah. There's a lot of history where U.S. oil interests typically would assassinate the leaders in these countries. Venezuela has been targeted as well. And
Ecuador's leader was just targeted as well, just recently. And I know a little bit about that just because Professor Steve Keen is there right now in Quito. Same with Michelle Bowens from the P2P Foundation, and they've both been talking about how it's really progressive, and they're actually the government is bringing in all of these ideas, really huge ideas for. It seems like they're preparing for post-dollar empire sort of centric world, and maybe a more diverse, a multipolar world with a new sort of currency and new economics and new internet-enabled thinking of peer-to-peer.
Well, I think that's one of the unintended consequences of the Iraq bombing, Iraq invasion, is that it sucked U.S. resources so much that they kind of lost track of what's happening in South America and Central America.
Yeah. Well, actually, a U.S. Marine wrote on the Google Plus page and said he was in the Iraq invasion, but he watches our show all the time, and it's changed his mind and enlightened him. And I guess how are we doing over here? Should we be? I see these people laughing. Our associates here laughing at the content. Are you still ready to keep on going, or we've been doing this?
Is there a limit? Are we off the air?
There's no limit. We could be here for the next 2-3 days.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like Jerry Lewis. We should be. I should come on and sing that song that Jerry Lewis always sings about.
Okay, wait.
You will walk again or something. You will walk again.
Arturo, if you have a question and you're on the video, raise your hand like Arturo just did, and.
Arturo's good.
He's good.
He raises his hand. He asks a good question. He's not drinking. He's not doing drugs. That's what we like.
Okay, Arturo, what's your question?
He's back?
Yeah. He has another question.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually in a group Skype call, so I have several people asking me questions to ask you guys, and one of them was, how long are the naked shorts going to keep up on gold just to suppress the real price of gold? Because obviously the demand is there.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're seeing now is that they flipped camps. They're now long gold, but they still have to try to manage it in the context of this non-taper news. Because imagine if you had gold, insiders understanding that the news would be non-taper.
Yeah.
Then gold before the non-taper news would have been 1,600.
Yeah.
And then the non-taper news would have hit, and it would have gone to 2,000. So before the non-taper news hits, they're like, okay, we got to keep it down. 1,400 is a key level. Manage it. They have ultimate resources. They've got all these entities that are just banging on gold all day long. And you could tell that was the sure sign to me that there would be no taper, was the artificial trading in gold leading up to this stupid non-taper news.
Something just happened there. Yeah, and that's actually another interesting point when you said that, because, of course, we covered that from New York, where J.P. Morgan, Turd Ferguson came on the show, and he said that J.P. Morgan was now long, very long, that they had cornered, in fact, the COMEX gold market. So when you talk about this taper news, the Market Watch, Dow Jones, Fox, all of them were saying, oh, this was a huge surprise. Nobody knew, and we saw that, of course, the huge spike in gold, 5% in a day. Well, if J.P. Morgan had cornered the COMEX gold paper market, clearly they seem to have some sort of inside information.
Well, you mentioned Carl Icahn previously. He's trying to rattle Apple to get them to engage in probably a more aggressive stock repurchase. They've got huge cash position, 140 billion. They keep that offshore.
Yeah.
If they bring it back to the U.S., they have a tax liability, and probably raise the dividend, for shareholders.
Yeah.
If I were Tim Cook, I would take 10 to 20% of my cash and I would buy silver and gold.
Yeah.
Because first of all, silver is a valuable component in all their electronic material. Number two, it would immediately double or triple in price. Microsoft for years has been manipulating markets by selling puts on their stock before buying their own stock. So Microsoft they know they're going to buy their stock next quarter. They're going to spend billions buying their own stock. But before the news comes out, they just happen to be selling these puts that they can just vacuum up all this free money. It's totally insider trading. It should be totally illegal. But, they do that all day long. So why shouldn't Apple just say, we're going to put 10% of our cash into silver, 10% in gold? The prices all hell would break loose, because now there'd be a mad scramble, because competitively they would have a huge advantage. But because Apple's in the pocket of the NSA, because Yahoo's in the pocket of the NSA, because Google's in the pocket of the NSA, they won't do these economically sound things. It's not capitalism. It's a kleptocracy. They do this stupid thing. It's a kakistocracy. They're all frickin' morons. They do stupid things. So, unfortunately, we must react to that.
Andy, would you like to say something? Andy Myers? Do you have any questions, Andy Myers? No. I can't hear you if you're speaking. No.
There he is.
Oh, well.
It's,
Okay. One more question for you, Arturo, and then we'll go to some more questions online because people are asking some.
How do you guys feel about Tesla's recent spike, and that a lot of people think that it's going to come crashing down very soon, but it still keeps going up?
Well, in Tesla, you have a couple of things going on. First of all, there's a massive short squeeze in the stock, from what I gather.
Yeah.
So the shorts are getting squeezed. Okay.
That's what silver would happen to silver when the short squeeze.
Second of all, their product, I think, caught the majors off guard. You know, remember the Volt, which came out? I think it was General Motors or something, and they killed it. You know, there's a great film by my friend Chris Payne called "Who Killed the Electric Vehicle?" or "Who Killed the Electric Car?" And it wasn't Chris Johnson. And they wanted, you know, they don't want an electric vehicle because they make too much money on the way it is now. So they caught the market completely off guard. They came to market with this product that is extraordinarily popular. And I think what's going to happen, though, to Tesla is I just read some stories that the major 3 car companies in the U.S. are now going to try to come out with a competitively priced electric vehicle.
Oh, wow.
So if they come out with a $25,000 similar vehicle, then competitively, then that would be a problem for Tesla. But right now, they own that market. But I mean, I've been a stockbroker for many years. I mean, it looks, you know, pricey as hell at the moment. You got to be crazy to go in there on the long side. But
actually, I forgot to put this on there. But well, Elon Musk is he's an entrepreneur though, and a lot of people, there's a lot of hatred for him because he's received some government subsidies, but they don't seem to have any hatred for Google or Apple or Ford or GM or JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or any of these other.
Yeah, they say the government can't pick winners.
Yeah.
Right? And they say, okay, the solar industry that the government got involved with, 2 or 3 companies that went bust.
Solyndra, yeah.
Solyndra. Okay, well, here's one they got involved with, and it's a huge home run. So the government, as a portfolio manager of making investments, is not any better or worse than James Cramer.
Yeah.
You know, James Cramer, all of his buys and sells over the past 5 years, you add them all up, and you would be exactly where you started 5 years ago. He's just a shill for Wall Street to do stupid trading all day. He's no better or worse than the U.S. government, who's just making investments. Some of them work, some of them don't work. I think they could probably be a lot more strategic and make a lot better investments if they weren't so corrupt, you know, with the likes of Congress that can trade on inside information. But even being as corrupt as the government is, and as dim-witted and as James Cramer-like as the government is, they still manage to find a winner, which gives you an idea of how entrepreneurial the United States is.
Well, exactly. Actually, I want to comment on that Forbes 400 billionaires list because all the American ones under 45, they had a list of them on Bloomberg or something, and all but 3 had earned it. Like they had basically, it was Elon Musk and the guy who did GoPro, and the guy was like a fanatic. He was working at his desk for 16 hours a day, and he built a contraption to feed himself and with liquids, so he didn't ever have to get up and leave his desk. So that's quite interesting. But we should wrap this up, and I'll just end with some questions. A quick one on the UK housing. Where do you think that's going to be? I think we've actually covered that quite a lot on Keiser Report lately. But somebody did ask here, what are your thoughts about how does a first-time buyer, get on the housing market?
Well, the UK housing market, people forget that 5 years ago, everybody was sitting on negative equity.
Yeah. Well,
you were sitting on negative equity. Your house was a loser. The mortgage was worth more than the house. That was just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was across the board.
Yeah.
Okay, then the government comes in and says, what we're going to do is we're going to print lots of money.
Yeah.
We're going to backstop. We're going to create 110% mortgages again, just like Bradford and Bringley and Northern Rock did before they went bust. And we're going to reinflate the housing bubble. Notice the word bubble. Now, within 24 months, that bubble will burst again. If you buy a house today in the UK, anywhere in the UK, including London, 90% chance that within a few years, you'll be sitting on negative equity once again.
Yeah, but also tying this to that story where I said the American guys like the GoPro and Elon Musk and Tesla, I mean, like, nobody in America is obsessed with housing like the British disease of these people just obsessed with, like, stop obsessing with housing, stop wasting all your capital and time speculating in the casino, and maybe put your capital to better use, maybe invent something, maybe build a business instead.
Right. I mean, in the UK, wealth means owning property.
Yeah.
Because it's something that they got from watching the monarchy and the aristocracy.
Yeah.
You know, they watch Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
And they see the guy who runs Downton Abbey, he doesn't do jack shit all day. And yet he owns this enormous house. I want to be like that guy. Who's that guy? Lord, I always forget his name.
Lord Snooty Puss. So we should wrap that up. This has been a long one. It's longer than expected. I know there are other calls and comments, but we should do this again now that we figured. Yeah, I think it'll be funny to go back and look at the beginning of the YouTube when we didn't really know we were on air.
Are we on?
Yeah, this is a normal evening for us.
I thought, okay, well, that's been good then. I guess
So-
it's time to leave.
So thank
Put on
you.
my famous watch.
Thank
you
you
know.
so much for answering the question.
Oh, thank you, Arturo. Thanks
This
for asking the
watch
question.
is voted #1 by jihadis around the world. It's the most reliable watch. If you're trying to blow something up, this Casio $30 watch, I've had it for 30 years. This is the watch for jihadis, first choice everywhere. Okay? This is what they use.
I think I better end it before it all goes horribly wrong. Thank you so much for the first 500 episodes of Keiser Report. Hopefully there will be 500 more if he didn't get us in trouble and we're exterminating this drone. See you.
Bye, y'all.